Welcome to Sakshi TV special immigration show with attorney Mr. Chand Parvatneni from Managing Attorney at law firm of Sim Parvatneni and Brown. Please note that Sakshi TV now has 3 immigration shows every week on Tuesday at 3 p.m. EST with attorney Ms. Sheila Murthy, Wednesdays at 5:30 p.m. EST with attorney Prashanti Reddy in English, and on Fridays at 6 p.m. EST with Banu Ilindra. Please tune in to ask your questions. If you are an immigration attorney and would like to join our special shows, please email us at usa@sakshi.com or call us at 866-725-7441. Before we begin the show, please note that the information provided on this show is not a legal advice and for general information purposes only. Sakshi TV or its agents will not be responsible for the use of information. If you need specific legal advice, please contact the attorney directly. Mr. Chand needs no introduction, but if you need consultation, please log on to spblawfirm.com for contact information. When you connect with them, don't forget to mention Sakshi TV. From the beginning, spblawfirm.com has put a wealth of free information and online tools in the hands of immigrant community and for the benefit of US employers. The www.spblawfirm.com site provides you with latest and cutting-edge information on US immigration law and policies explained in terms you do not have to be a lawyer to understand. So, today's topic is immigration visas and other options for immigration green card holders. Hello, Mr. Chand Garu. I hope you're doing well.
No, it's good.
It's great. Yeah. So, Mr. Chand Garu, are there any new immigration updates that we'll have to know this week?
We just got the visa bulletin just out for the month of January. And the visa bulletin is not that promising. EB3 dates did not move at all. There is no movement of any kind for EB3. So, anybody on EB3, I think it's a pretty disappointing visa bulletin. EB2, again, it is disappointing, but at least the good thing is it moved ahead a few months. Now it's at July 8th, 2012. At least the very fact that the dates are not retrogressing but moving ahead is still the silver lining for the EB2 category. EB1 is current, so EB1 no issues whatsoever. And so other than that, I think on the visa bulletin side, it was not much of a surprise. And hopefully the next couple of months, we'll have to watch and see how the dates will go ahead. But all forecasts look like we will not see big jumps like we saw last year.
Yes.
That's on the visa bulletin side. And apart from that, there are various bills being discussed. The Build Back Better Act that got passed in the House last month, that is going to be discussed in the Senate this month. As of today, this bill is not up for voting in Senate yet, but hopefully, I think in the next couple of days, we will know what's happening on the Senate side and whether it will even pass in Senate, become a law or not.
Yes. Now, Mr. Parvatneni Garu, today we're going to discuss very deeply about green cards. So, let's start from the beginning. How does a foreigner in USA get a green card?
Two main ways how somebody gets a green card in US. One is called family-based way. The other one is through employment-based. So the family-based way is when a US citizen is related to somebody else who is a foreigner. Typical examples are some US citizen marries a foreigner. That's one kind. Or a US citizen wants to sponsor their parent who's a foreigner, or a US citizen wants to sponsor their sibling, a brother or a sister who is a foreigner. So they can do it, and the immediate blood relatives are eligible to get a green card. And when a US citizen sponsors for their immediate relative to get a green card, it is called family-based processing. So in the immigration world, so the family-based way of filing would get them a green card if a US citizen sponsors for their immediate relative. You cannot sponsor for indirect relative. Like you cannot sponsor for your spouse's brother, for example. You cannot sponsor for your parents' sibling, for example, because you don't have a direct blood relation. So typically, it is only if you have a direct blood relation, that is when you can sponsor a green card using the family-based process. And on the other side is employment-based. So employment-based side is where you have a US employer, a company that's US, that's having business in US. That company can sponsor a green card for their employees. So that is another way where foreigners can get a green card. And typically, somebody could work on a H-1B visa, somebody could work on some other status, or somebody is not even working for that company but is living outside US, and a company can still sponsor for the green card for that person to come into the country as a green card holder. So, high level family based is one big area where people get their green cards, and employment based is the other side where a lot of people get their green cards. A lot of foreigners get their green cards and move to reside in US permanently.
Yes. Now, Mr. Parvatini, can you tell us how do most Indians get it typically? Is it the first way or the second way?
So most of the Indians typically get it through the employment-based means, just because a lot of Indians come and work on H-1B visa. Most of the people on H-1B visa are Indian nationals. The statistics show that H-1B visa is highly popular with Indians, and India as a country, it's very the IT industry in India is very, very robust. It's very mature, and the educational institutes in India are very, very mature, very, very robust. India is producing top class, top notch engineers, which is why a lot of people from India are able to come and work in US, because right now talent is in India. And so US wants the talent to come in and work in US, which is why a lot of people, US is attracting a lot of talented people from India to come and work in US. And since many people work in US, employment-based immigration is one of the most common ways for people to pursue and then become green card holders. So typically, in general, family-based filings do happen, but I would say there are a lot of people get green cards through the employment-based ways, even though family-based, because once somebody becomes a green card holder, the next step is becoming a US citizen. Once you become a US citizen, you can sponsor your parents, you can sponsor your siblings. So technically, it starts off with employment-based. Somebody gets a green card through employment-based. Eventually, when they become a US citizen, Indians also sponsor their family members. So typically, both happen, but I would say employment-based is how it initially starts off.
Yes. Now, Mr. Parvatini, let's say that an employee comes to USA, starts working, finds an employer who will sponsor the visa. What are the typical steps in it?
So the first thing is, so once the employer and the employee discuss and the employer confirms that, okay, they're willing to sponsor the employee, there are a couple of complex steps that need to be followed. It's not a simple process. It is not a quick process. It is a time-taking process. And you have to work with a number of government agencies to get the green card. So the first step starts off with Department of Labor. So one of the things the company has to show before they can sponsor anybody for a green card is that they are trying to hire somebody in US and they're not able to find that particular, an employee with that particular skill set, either educational or work experience or a combination of those things. They're not able to find employees with that skill set in US, and that is the reason why they are trying to hire a foreigner. So that is something what the companies have to prove through a number of steps. And what that means is step number one, they work with Department of Labor to find out what is the salary for a given position. So the employer will have to tell Department of Labor what is the job position that they have open. And Department of Labor, as a part of the first step, will say the salary required for that step. At that point of time, the employer will advertise. There is a certain set of steps they have to follow, certain set of places where they have to advertise, and look for qualified employees locally. So if the employer advertises like they're supposed to, and they do not find any qualified employees, that is when they have to go back to Department of Labor, show all their efforts, and then ask for permission from Department of Labor. At that point of time, Department of Labor will certify what is called a firm labor application and certify that there is no labor for that particular job in US. So that is the very first step, working with Department of Labor to make sure they get that firm labor certified.
Yes.
At that point of time, so the next step is the employer now goes to USCIS, the Department of Homeland Security. So Now they go to Department of Homeland Security and show that since DOL has certified there is nobody locally in US, they are ready to file an immigrant petition, the green card petition for the employee. This is what is called an I-140. So at this point of time, the USCIS will look at the evidence provided, and if it passes the regulatory burden, they get an approval. So that is when the applicant is able to apply for a green card. So at this point of time, the employer has done what they're supposed to do, and the applicant has to proactively apply for a green card through a form called I-485. It's to adjust their status from non-immigrant to a green card holder. And that is the final step. Once that is approved, that is how they get the green card, and they finally become the green card holder in US. But to get through all these steps, it's a long process. It takes a number of times. Right now, about 10, 15 years. Right now, somebody who has applied in 2010, 2011, they're getting their green cards now. So clearly, it's a very, very time-taking process for Indian nationals.
Yes. Mr. Parvatneni, can you please explain us in detail about the labor filling process in green card? What happens during this stage?
So labor filing is where the employer is requesting permission from Department of Labor to hire a foreign national. So this is a process where the employer is trying to make sure there is like nobody qualified for that job position in US. To give an example, if a company is hiring for a Java developer, and their requirement is that to be a Java developer, you require a master's degree and you require, say, 2 years of job experience. So this employer is going to Department of Labor and showing Department of Labor this requirement. And Department of Labor will tell the wage and will ask the employer to advertise. And as a part of this labor filing, the employer is supposed to advertise in mandatorily required places, and this is called recruitment process step. So as a part of the recruitment process step, they're supposed to advertise in a local newspaper for 2 Sundays. That is, by law, they're supposed to do that. They're also supposed to advertise in the state workforce website. That's required. They're also supposed to advertise in a couple of other places. So they have to follow all these steps, and they have to document their recruitment process. At the end of their recruitment period, they have to go back and report the steps through a filing called a 9089 labor filing. So in this filing, Department of Labor is notified of various places where the employer has advertised, and the employer also lets Department of Labor know that they did not find any minimally qualified applicants for that position. So this is all done through an electronic filing called firm labor filing. And the part of the process is the employer documenting all the steps and letting USCIS know that they have done all they're supposed to do. And at the end of the process, because they have not found anybody qualified, they're filing this application, this labor application. And so typically once it is filed, it takes about 5 to 6 months to hear back from Department of Labor. And once it is certified, the labor gets certified, pretty much a very, very important step in this process is done.
Yes. Mr. Parvatneni, can you explain about the second step, which is the filling of the I-140?
So the I-140 is immigrant petition filed by the employer on behalf of their employee. So this is filed with USCIS, Department of Homeland Security. This is the same place where the employer also files for their H-1B visas. So Department of Homeland Security, what they are looking for is, they are trying to make sure the company is a bona fide US employer, the company is a legitimate employer, the company has the resources to pay the foreign worker. That is what they're trying to make sure, because DOL has already certified that there is nobody available in US. So that part has already been taken care of. USCIS, through this step, this I-140 step, is trying to make sure that the employer is a bona fide employer, and they have the ability to pay. They also make sure the employee is qualified for the job. So they make sure whatever qualifications are required by the employer, the employee has those qualifications. They also make sure the company is legitimate. They also make sure the company has the ability to pay for the employment of the employee. So that is what they're trying to make sure. And if USCIS is satisfied, they approve the immigrant petition. And approval of the immigrant petition means the I-140 is approved. And what that means is the employee can now apply for the green card once the dates are current. So that is what is involved in this I-140 second step. The second step is also very critical. The minute the second step is over, the big thing is not only they're eligible to file for the green cards whenever the dates are current. The other bigger issue is the H-1B can be given only for 6 years. Anybody on H-1B visa can only work for 6 years in general. But if the I-140 process is done and the I-140 is approved, one can keep on extending their H-1B even after 6 years. So for anybody who is working in the country on H-1B visa, to work after 6 years on H-1B, they have to have the I-140 approved. So unless the I-140 is approved, they cannot even stay in the country and work on H-1B after 6 years.
Yes, Mr. Parvatini. Can you tell us what happens in the third final stage, filing of the I-485?
So the I-485, so this is the final step. So I-485 is an application that the employee, the foreign national has to file this application, the I-485 application. And what this application does is it tells us about the applicant's intent to get a green card. So the applicant is telling USCIS that they are ready to obtain their green card and adjust their status. However, the rule is that one can only file I-485 once their I-140 is approved, and or not only, I mean, I-140 doesn't have to be approved, but their date has to be current. So every country will have a priority date, which is why we have to look at the visa bulletin every month. So for example, for India, the current priority date is 2012, either for EB2 or EB3 categories. So if once you have your priority date, on that day, you can file your I-485 application. So the I-485 application, once your date is current, the employee files the I-485 application. The dates are still current. Typically in about 6 to 8 months, in general, one is supposed to get their green card if the dates are current. If the dates are not current, sometimes it could take a very, very long time. The dates retrogress after filing a 485. Sometimes it could take a very long time. But I-485 step is the final step where an employee will ask USCIS to approve their green card. So hopefully if everything is good, the dates are current, anytime after 6 to 8 months, people should be getting their green cards.
Yes. Now, Mr. Parvatini, can you tell us how much does it cost? What are the expenses during each stage?
The filing with the Department of Labor. There is a zero filing fee. There is no filing fee with Department of Labor. The only issue is that there is a legal fee attached and there is an advertising cost because the employer has to advertise in various media. The employer has to pay for the advertising, number one. The employer also has to pay for the lawyer because typically most of the perm filings, the labor filings, are done by taking help of a law firm. So typically the only costs one will have is either the advertising cost or the lawyer fees. And typically you can see this run anywhere between $3,000 to $6,000, depending on where you're advertising, what law firm you're using, and so on. So that is the very first step. The second step for I-140. I-140 has government fees. There is a $700 government fees that the employer has to pay the government, USCIS. And there is also legal fees. If a law firm is involved and law firm is preparing the I-140 package, there is also legal fees involved. Typically, this is anywhere between $1,500 to $4,000, depending on the law firm. And the next step is the 485. So for the 485, there is right now it is $1,225 that has to be paid to the government. That is one part. And then there is also legal fees. Depending on the law firm, it could be anywhere between $1,000 to $3,000, $4,000, depending on the law firm and the kind of complexity of your case, of one's case. And one thing to keep in mind is that the employee cannot pay any fees during the labor process. They cannot pay any advertising fees. They cannot pay any legal fees. The only fees that an employee, a foreign worker, can pay is the I-485 fee or the premium processing fee for I-140. They can pay those fees. But for anything else, the foreign worker should not pay. the employer has to bear all the expenses connected with their labor and perm application. That is very important. And typically, if any employer is asking those fees to be reimbursed, that is probably not right, and they are violating some law.
Yes. Now, Mr. Parvatini, can you tell us if a student is on F1 visa status, can they start the green card processing?
Right. So a lot of this is a very common question because there is a misconception that if somebody is on F1 status, one cannot really get an I-140 filing done. There are some rules, so there are some caveats. F1 is a single intent visa, which is why people have this misconception. However, I mean, if you're an F1 visa in the country for some time, and then all of a sudden, because you have a good opportunity from an employer, and they're ready to process somebody's green card, the perm can be done, and the I-140 can be done. We have done that a number of times. There is no rule that says somebody on F1 cannot go through the labor process, cannot go through the I-140 process, because a lot of times people wait until they're on H1 because there is this misconception that one cannot get the green card process started while they're on F1 status. That is incorrect. I mean, somebody on F1 definitely have to discuss with an attorney before getting into it, because there are some caveats that one has to be careful about. That being said, somebody on F1 is eligible to go through the perm process, is eligible to go through the I-140 process. And if one has an offer, they just, I think, from their employer, there's nothing wrong. Just only thing is just discuss with your attorney, because it is not as straightforward as when somebody is on H1B, because H1B is a dual intent visa and F1 is a single intent visa. Okay, that's it.
Yes. Now, Mr. Parvatini, can you tell us that is it mandatory that a person or the foreigner should be employed to start his green card processing?
It is, again, most of the green card filings that we see, typically it is done by the employers for their existing employees. That is the most common way. And in general, that is what happens in the industry. Somebody is working for an employer and the employer is happy with their work, and they want to go ahead and sponsor their permanent residents. Even though typically that is what normally happens, it doesn't have to be that way. Green card can be done for future employment. So if somebody has a future employee, somebody who's talented and they want to sponsor their green card, the companies can still go ahead and file it as a future green card. It is permissible, and a lot of companies do future employment based green cards. That is perfectly acceptable. The only thing is, for those kind of cases, the company has an additional burden on proving the ability to pay. One of the things that the company has to show during I-140 filing is that they have the ability to pay for the employment of an employee. If somebody is already your employee, most of the time you've already met that burden, because that person is already working for this company. However, when it is future employment, when somebody is not an employee yet, the burden is a little high. The ability to pay has to be demonstrated, but it can be done, and one doesn't have to be a current employee for the green card process to start.
Yes. Now, Mr. Parvatini, can you tell us what are the major documents that an employee should carry or should have when he starts the green card processing?
The main documents that they initially need are their experience letters, because when their perm filing is being done, when their I-140 filing is being done, one of the things that the employers are required to prove to USCIS is that the employee is qualified. What that means is typically the experience is very, very important for the green card filing, for most of the green card filings. So whatever is the experience that is required for the job has to be proved by the employer, that the employee has that experience. And the way to prove it is through their experience letters. So every employee has to make sure they reach out to their old employers and get their experience letters. For those employers, those past employers who are not willing to give experience letters, one can always get affidavits. So affidavits are acceptable. So either an experience affidavit or an experience letter is something what every employee who's going through this green card process should have. That is number one. And down the line, when it comes to the 485 stage, the birth certificate is important. So it is very, very important that people plan for their I-485 stage and get their birth certificates from India well ahead of time. Or if it is a case where the birth certificates are not available, in India we have a process called a Form 10, Notice of Non-Availability of Birth Certificate. So they just have to work with the local government authorities in India and make sure they get that notice of non-availability of birth certificate if their birth certificate is missing, and get some affidavits in case their birth certificate is missing. Or the best case scenario is they should just try and get their birth certificate if it is available. So these documents are very important from an employee's perspective. And from an employer perspective, typically it's the tax returns, it's the company's financials and those documents. So in general, if these documents are available, their green card process should be very smooth.
Yes. Now, thank you so much, Mr. Parvatneni, for giving us the wealth of information. We had an amazing show today. I really thank the viewers for joining too. You're watching Sakshi TV with me, Shivani Raj.